Next project we're going to look at is, well, it's kind of a little game in itself. So this is actually noughts and crosses, and the noughts and crosses counters you will get from the MDF board, and they are actually these little buttons here. So if you don't want to make the bag, you can use them as buttons, but there's the happy ones and the cross ones to make your noughts and crosses. And the eyebrows, and you see them popping out there, they are all actually holes, so you can pop those out and stitch the eyebrows in as well, so you make them happy or angry. And they will place on the kind of counters, you place the counters on the grid on the bag to play the game. The instructions are on the back. So what we need to do first of all is put some little slots in so we can add the drawstring to the little bag that this is going to make. So I've just got a scrap of the white fabric that you'll have plenty of this because it comes from the edges and the borders of the panel that you receive. So any scrap of that white fabric is perfect. Now I'm going to sew these on the machine. If you don't want to sew buttonholes on the machine, then an alternative is just to put a layer of fusible webbing between these two and just iron it in place, and then just trim a little bit of the excess off, and that will do exactly the same job, because obviously we need to cut two little slits in there to make the drawstring. I'm actually going to do it on the machine, and I'm going to use my buttonhole foot. If you don't have a buttonhole foot, a lot of machines will have zigzag functions, and you can do it with that. So I'm just going to line up my foot with the bottom. I mean, these, I've got pink marks on here, but yours will actually come printed on. I've just kind of highlighted them in pink to make them a little bit darker so you can see where I'm going. So I'm going to line that up, so the pink mark with the centre part on my foot, and the buttonhole on this machine always starts at the bottom and then works its way up. So everything is set, the button is in place, and you're wanting it the smallest button you can find for this, because you don't want a huge kind of buttonhole gap, but you do want something that's going to be large enough to be able to pass that through. And that's my first buttonhole complete. Just pull that out so you can see it. So I'm just going to repeat that process and put a second one there. Okay, both my buttonholes are in place there. So now all I need to do is rip out the centre of those. Let me just get rid of these extra threads as well. Rip out the centre of those, and you'll notice when I did this, I used a piece of that scrap fabric on the back just to stabilise it, because if you do it on a single layer of fabric, what you'll find is the fabric will bunch up, and that's just because it needs that extra bit of stability in there. So I'm just taking away all of those excess threads. And then we're going to open these buttonholes up. Now to do that, you actually want to put a little pin at the top there. So I'm going to just come through from the back, across the top. I'm going to come a little bit lower down actually, through from the back, across the top and back in. And that little pin will stop you from ripping all the way through if you get a little bit too giddy with your seam ripper. Ideally you want to do like I've done there and push it through the fabric to stop you going too far. But if you can't do that, then that little pin there, if I just rip and keep going, that little pin will stop me going too far. So I'm going to pull the other one out there, and then we'll start on the construction. I've just swapped the foot on my machine back to its standard foot, and before we go ahead and sew these two panels together, which you're going to do both right sides together like so, I'm just going to take away some of this excess fabric that I've got on here, because this is just there to stabilise those buttonhole stitches, and we really don't need it complicating the later stages. So I'm just going to take that and snip it off all four sides, and it doesn't matter too much about going in between those buttonholes, but you do want the excess off all the way around the edge. So I'm now going to go ahead, line these up and stitch them together. So now that's all stitched together, we are going to go ahead and hem the top. And the reason we put those buttonholes in first is now when we roll it over to do our double rolled hem, they are already nicely in position and we don't have to worry about trying to add them later. So the next step is just to fold that out and run round all the way around the outside edge with a little stitch to hold it in place. So you're creating a double rolled hem like that with those in place. So I'm going to go ahead, pin all this in place, and then we'll jump on the machine and sew it in position. So our bag's nearly finished. I've popped out all of the pieces from the MDF board. So these are your playing pieces. So it's essentially it's noughts and crosses. The instructions will actually come on the back of the bag, and you can use the bag itself as your game board. So the last step is just to add the tie at the top. So when we sewed these in the first place, these are so you can create that channel that goes all the way through. And I've just got 40 centimetres of the tape that's included in the bundle, and I've also got just a plastic needle. You can do this with a safety pin. There are lots of kind of tools on the market to help you do this kind of thing, but sometimes the simplest are the best. So I'm just gradually kind of threading that through with my plastic needle, popping out of that second hole that we made. And that is our project complete. Let me just even that up a little bit. There we go. So we're all done. Now you can secure these ends. You can do them by double turning them and stitching them on the machine, or really simply and actually quite handily to stop them going back through the buttonholes, you can just tie a knot in them to stop those from fraying. And that is your little pouch with all your game pieces ready to play, and then when you finish playing you can pack them all up and pop them back in the bag.